This is a community that has embraced the United States military. And I know that in a previous part of my life, one of the responsibilities I had was I was what we call assignment officer. I sent men and women down here from the United States Navy to duty. And my damnedest challenge was once they got here, they didn't want to leave. And I would say, well, we got these things called ships. We got to get out of here. But nobody wanted to leave. They love San Antonio. So my compliments. You have created a great place. And it's because of hard work and partnerships. And that is exactly what we need to do in the cyber week. It's going to be about hard work and about partnerships. Now, San Antonio is very important to the future of cyber within the Department of Defense. We are growing a dedicated cyber mission force for the department of about 6,200 people. And here at San Antonio with 24th Air Force, I'd argue with 25th Air Force as well, important components of that. And as we bring these 6,200 men and women online, a good segment of them will be assigned duties here in San Antonio. We have made the decision that San Antonio, both the Air Force side as well as putting on my NSA hat, the investments we've made at NSA Texas, these are foundational to the future and we're going to keep building on them. So you are going to see a larger footprint coming to San Antonio in the next few years on the cyber side. We have done that in part for a couple reasons. Number one, we have a significant DoD cyber and national security footprint already in place that we felt that we could build. Number two, we saw an environment where the local community embraces the military. Number three, we saw a local environment where we have already created partnerships with the University of Texas at San Antonio, which has been designated by NSA as one of our centers of excellence, where we thought, look, we have an educational center of excellence here that we can build on. Because quite frankly, we're competing for dedicated men and women out there, both in uniform and as civilians, to be part of this cyber capability we're trying to build for the nation. In addition, San Antonio just comes across to me as a place that loves innovation and problem solving. When you are about creating partnerships, you are about creating relationships, and you are about doing that for the purpose of generating outcomes. And in the end, that's what we're all about. We all want to generate outcomes. Whether you're doing that in the private sector, or whether you're doing that in uniform, or you're doing the academic world. It is all about how we generate outcomes. With respect to the cyber side specifically, first, U.S. Cyber Command, 3 primary missions. Number 1, defend the Department of Defense's networks. Number 2, generate and then lead this dedicated 6,200 person force that the department is creating to execute the range of missions for cyber department, from the defensive side, quite frankly, all the way to the offensive capabilities that we are going to create for the nation. The third mission, and one that also brought me to San Antonio for the last day or so, when directed by the President and the Secretary of Defense, we have been told to be prepared to defend critical infrastructure in the United States that is under attack in the cyber region. Now, the U.S. government has designated 16 segments in the commercial world as critical to the nation's security. Think about transportation, petroleum, energy, fuel, financial. There's 16 of them. And so one of the reasons why I try to do opportunities like this is to do that mission. We have got to create partnerships between DoD and the commercial sector. And we have also got to work on how do we tie this all together with the other elements in the federal government that work cyber missions. Because as a military guy, as the Department of Defense, we partner with the Department of Homeland Security, we partner with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, primarily, to try to bring cyber capacity from the government to support critical areas for us in the private sector. I'm also in San Antonio because the other mission for us is, as the director of the National Security Agency, NSA has 2 primary missions. One, foreign intelligence, tends to get a lot of attention. We've been reading about it in the newspapers for the last 15 months or so. We use our foreign intelligence capabilities to gain insights as to what are nation states, groups,
and individuals doing in the cyber arena, so we get a sense for, so what are the kind of threats that as a nation we are going to have to deal with in cyber. The other NSA mission that doesn't get as much attention but is a big cyber issue for us is NSA is also tasked with a mission set we call information assurance to develop the cryptographic and security standards for the Department of Defense, to partner with other elements in the U.S. government to do the same in terms of cryptographic standards and security standards for the rest of the U.S. government, and then, when requested, partner with the FBI and others to provide cyber expertise to support the private sector. So at times when the FBI will approach us and say, hey, we need you to bring some of your deep expertise. So some of the major compromises that you've read about publicly, we sometimes, partnering with the FBI, will provide our capabilities to identify who are they, how they get in, where are they, what do you need to do to remediate, and how do you make sure that it doesn't happen again. So between U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency, two organizations with a big role in the cyber arena. Now, in no way should we ever forget that in order to execute those roles, just as I said to you, for us, it is about partnerships. We have got to create partnerships for the department to apply this capability in an effective way. Because I always remind our workforce, the driving edge for technology, the driving impetus for innovation and change isn't coming from within the Department of Defense in this segment. It is coming from the private sector. And we need to harness that technical insight. We need to harness that innovation. We need to work collaboratively to generate better outcomes for our nation. And among those better outcomes for our nations are secure networks and structures that enable us to compete and do business on a sound footing, where we don't have to worry about, so is someone stealing the intellectual property I've developed? Am I losing a competitive edge? Can I trust the data that I'm counting on? Those are all important concerns for us as a nation. And it's in our best interest as a nation that we sit down and ask ourselves, in this environment, how are we going to move forward? Because if anybody thinks that this is a short-term phenomenon, or that this is a problem that's going to go away in a couple of years, I think you are sadly mistaken. Whether it be the actions of nation states, whether it be the actions of groups, whether they be associated with criminal activity, whether they be associated with terrorists, with hacktivists, this is not a phenomenon that is going away. Because those groups, those individuals feel that through the use of cyber, they can gain a competitive advantage. Whether that advantage is stealing the intellectual property of a company, using it to develop a competitive edge for themselves, whether it's a criminal entity that looks at the amount of money, quite frankly, that can be made through harnessing this technology, whether it's a nation state that wants to use the power of cyber to penetrate networks, whether they be private or public on the governmental side, to generate insights as to what we're doing as a nation. Those are all long-term challenges that aren't going away. We've got to figure out collectively as a nation, what are we going to do to address this? And I think in the end, this is going to be all about how do we create partnerships between the public sector, the private sector, academia, business, intelligence, the Department of Defense, FBI, DHS. It's all about how do we create partnerships that will enable us to share information and insight. Because the other point I make is, if you think any one organization has all the answers to this problem, I would love to meet them. Because I've been spending a lot of time on this problem center in my career, and I have come to the conclusion that another reason we have to team is because, quite frankly, there is no one organization that has all the answers. It's all about how do we bring insight and knowledge together to generate those outcomes. Likewise, I often try to remind our workforce, if you think that there's a single technology that's going to emerge, that's going to make this problem go away, I don't believe it. Because my view is, in the end, and I say this as an individual who has spent a good part of his career developing the skill sets to penetrate networks, if it's designed by man, it can be defeated by man. And so if you think we're going to create the perfect solution that no one can ever penetrate, I don't believe it. To me, it's all about how do we come up with a very multi-dimensional, multi-layered approach that takes multiple capabilities and harnesses them together in a kind of cohesive whole, a very layered approach to doing business. Likewise, this is more than just technology. I am amazed at the groups that I run into that will tell me, well, it may not be a single silver bullet that will address this problem, but in the end, it's just about technology, right? No way. My attitude is technology is a huge part of this solution set, but much of this will boil down to how do we educate people about personal behavior and the choices they're making in the world of the web? How do we help leaders understand the priority of this? In this job, I deal with a lot of different elements in the private sector, and quite frankly, I can tell when a member of the C-suite is fully on board with this, and they have set a priority for their entire organization. And we recognize that this represents a fundamental threat to our very business model, that if we fail to achieve a level of security here, our long-term viability as a corporate entity potentially gets called into question. I mean, you could argue the financial sector came to that conclusion a long time ago. They just couldn't sustain significant losses where the public comes to the conclusion, well, I just don't know if I can trust the data that I'm getting from my bank anymore. And so, one of those 16 segments, one of the things I talk about is the financial segment is the one area where, in my experience, I would argue heavy leadership involvement, where culturally they have come to the conclusion they need to invest, and they're also a segment that has resources and they're willing to invest in them. So whether you look at a JP Morgan Chase, they have very publicly talked about their baseline computer network defense budget is about $250 million. There's not a lot of corporations in the United States that can afford to spend that kind of money as a baseline. Now, this is more than about money, because even after $250 million a year, Chase has suffered, JP Morgan has suffered a significant, very public penetration. And I say that, I have been up, spoken with them, they're a great organization. Many of their cybersecurity team, quite frankly, has served in San Antonio. There's a lot of ex-Air Force officers in their cybersecurity team, many of whom I've served with before in my life, many of them with time in San Antonio. So money alone is not the answer to this problem.